Red Bull makes a final offer to Max Verstappen to convince him to stay. Want to know the staggering amount of money and the contract conditions they're offering to keep him? Then this video is for you. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. Max Verstappen's presence at Red Bull Racing, once seen as the immovable centerpiece of an unstoppable dynasty, now feels more like the final thread holding together a team unraveling at the seams. There's an unmistakable shift occurring, one that transcends race results and driver performances. The very soul of Red Bull Racing appears to be undergoing a seismic transformation, and for the first time in over a decade, that signature confidence that once defined the Austrian outfit is no longer visible. The team that once projected an image of unwavering dominance, of irreverent swagger and unrelenting ambition, now seems riddled with doubt, consumed by internal politics, and haunted by the fear of losing the one asset they can't replace, Max Verstappen. And in that fear, they're reportedly considering a move so unprecedented, so wildly outside the norms of Formula One, that it almost sounds like satire, renaming or rebranding the team in such a way that Verstappen himself becomes embedded into its core identity. Not as a mere figurehead or champion, but as a foundational element of the brand itself. The whispers suggest Red Bull could become Team Verstappen, either literally or symbolically, marking the most dramatic shift in team brand dynamics that F1 has ever witnessed. It's an idea that, just a few seasons ago, would have been dismissed as fanfiction. But now it feels like a real possibility, one born not from innovation, but from desperation. This isn't about marketing brilliance or fan engagement. It's about survival. It's about trying to stop a superstar from bolting in a direction that could leave Red Bull gutted, exposed, and embarrassingly vulnerable. The move raises deeper questions about the state of the team's leadership, structure, and identity. Has Red Bull lost its way so completely that its only lifeline is tying its future entirely to one man's presence? Is this the same team that once prided itself on being bigger than any single individual, that built an empire on the principle of youthful rebellion and competitive hunger? Or are we now looking at a fractured organization willing to reshape its entire existence around one driver, just to keep its walls from collapsing? Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. The tension behind the scenes isn't merely speculation. It's written all over the sequence of high-profile exits that have left gaping holes in Red Bull's technical and operational armor. The shockwaves began with Adrian Newey's departure, a bombshell that sent the paddock into a frenzy. Newey wasn't just a technical director. He was a genius, the architect behind Red Bull's modern-era success, and the spiritual guide of its engineering prowess. His decision to walk away was interpreted not just as a career move, but as a sign that something was deeply off behind the scenes. And if that didn't raise enough alarm bells, it was swiftly followed by a cascade of other exits that compounded the unease. Jonathan Wheatley, long considered a cornerstone of the team's race day brilliance, quietly departed. Laurent Mekies, who was courted but never fully committed, pivoted away. And then, like a detonation, came the dismissal of Christian Horner, an icon, a leader, a figure so intertwined with Red Bull's identity that his removal felt less like a restructuring and more like a beheading. Horner's fall wasn't clean, and it wasn't without controversy. Rumors swirled for weeks, with insiders hinting at explosive meetings, clashing egos, and behind-the-scenes power plays driven by stakeholders who no longer had the patience for internal conflict. The Austrian investors, who now hold greater sway over the team's direction than ever before, were reportedly the driving force behind Horner's ouster. For them, Verstappen is the priority, and any perceived threat to his continued loyalty had to be eliminated, no matter how painful or symbolic the sacrifice. Removing Horner, however, may have come too late. Because now the unthinkable is being considered, a future where Max Verstappen no longer sees Red Bull as his natural home. What's more chilling is that Verstappen hasn't even publicly committed to staying long-term, despite these massive shifts orchestrated seemingly in his favor. The silence is deafening. Every diplomatic comment, every vague statement about loyalty, every carefully worded response in the media only fuels speculation. Is he playing a waiting game? Is he biding his time, watching the chaos unfold, weighing his options before making the ultimate decision to leave? And if so, what does that say about the team's future? Because if all of these monumental changes, if sacrificing the team principle, reshuffling the technical hierarchy, and potentially renaming the entire organization, still aren't enough to secure his future, then the implications are terrifying. This is no longer just a story about a driver and a team. It's become a cautionary tale about what happens when an organization becomes too dependent on a single figure. Red Bull was once the disruptor of Formula One, the team that broke the mold and redefined what success looked like in the modern era. But now, in their bid to retain Verstappen, they may have compromised the very essence of what made them great. And even if they succeed in convincing him to stay, at what cost? How much of their identity will be left intact? And if he does walk away, after all this, what will remain? Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. Because beneath the surface-level moves and the PR statements lies a much darker truth. Red Bull Racing may no longer be Red Bull Racing. It may be a shell of its former self, propped up by hope and history, chasing a version of itself that no longer exists. And in their pursuit of holding on to Max Verstappen, they may have already lost what made them special in the first place. Whispers emerging from deep inside the Italian paddock have ignited an explosive conversation across the entire Formula One world. A conversation so outrageous, so disruptive, that even seasoned insiders are struggling to wrap their heads around it. The notion that Red Bull, the very team that once stood as a cold, calculated symbol of performance engineering and ruthless ambition, would contemplate rebranding its very identity around a single individual, even one as dominant and era-defining as Max Verstappen, is not just shocking, it's unprecedented. This isn't about sponsorship rights or symbolic gestures. This isn't a one-off helmet livery or a PR-friendly foundation tie-in. This is about something far more seismic, the possible integration of Verstappen's very name into the DNA of a Formula One team's title, a transformation that would echo through the sport's history books and potentially change the power dynamics between teams and drivers forever. And yet, this is precisely what appears to be on the table. From internal strategy sessions at Milton Keynes to whispered conversations behind closed doors in Firenze, the discussions aren't just hypothetical anymore. Whether it's the flagship Red Bull Racing operation or their ever-mutating sister team, currently undergoing yet another identity metamorphosis, what's being weighed is not just branding. It's legacy, leverage, and the limits of power. It's a bet so bold it borders on desperation, a move that screams of a corporation frantically trying to anchor itself to a single force of dominance amid growing uncertainty, political chaos, and a rapidly changing competitive landscape. And the stakes could not be higher. Because if this actually happens, if a Formula One team is rebranded, officially, legally, and structurally, to incorporate Max Verstappen into its title, it would mark a line crossed that no other driver in the history of the sport has even approached. Not Michael Schumacher, whose tenure at Ferrari redefined an era. Not Lewis Hamilton, whose symbiosis with Mercedes birthed a dynasty of 7 championships and global cultural reach. Sure, Hamilton had Project 44. Sure, there were collaborations and partnerships. But no team, not even Ferrari at its most sycophantic, not even Mercedes at its most reverential, ever dared to suggest that a driver could become a foundational pillar of the team's name. This isn't flattery. This isn't homage. This is rewriting the hierarchy of Formula One in real time, and it's doing so in a way that exposes as much fragility as it does reverence. Because let's be brutally honest. While Max Verstappen's brilliance on the track is undeniable, his raw talent, mental toughness, and racercraft have made him arguably the most dominant driver of his generation. He is, ultimately, still a component within a far larger machine. He is the spearhead, yes, but not the shaft, the hand that throws it, or the forge that made it. Red Bull's success has always been a composite victory. Adrian Newey's aerodynamic genius, Christian Horner's political maneuvering, the technical staff's relentless innovation, and yes, Verstappen's talent behind the wheel. But what happens when that balance is shattered? What happens when one man is elevated above all others, not just in reputation but in organizational identity? The implications are vast and troubling. Red Bull once thrived on its ability to see through the noise, to separate hype from substance, to build a ruthless but effective ecosystem where drivers were fast but interchangeable, where no one was bigger than the badge. Now that ecosystem is shifting, no cracking, under the gravitational pull of a single star. Verstappen is no longer just a driver. He is becoming a brand within a brand, a force whose influence seems to seep into every corridor of Red Bull's decision-making apparatus. And the question that must now be asked, as uncomfortable as it is whether Red Bull has the institutional courage to tell him no. Can they resist the allure of short-term headlines and fandom worship to maintain the structural integrity of a team built on collective brilliance rather than individual stardom? Because the risks are enormous. Formula One is not tennis or golf. It is not a sport built around solitary genius. It is a symphony of data, coordination, chemistry, and trust. And if Verstappen, brilliant though he may be, is allowed to reshape that symphony around himself, what happens when the music falters? What happens if results decline, if the new regulations favor rivals, if Honda's future with the team becomes uncertain, or if Newey's exit marks the beginning of a technical brain drain? What happens when the driver whose name is on the door starts questioning the very organization bearing his initials? The power Verstappen now wields is immense, and with it comes a burden no driver has ever carried before. It is no longer just about lap times and trophies. It's about becoming the face, the brand, the identity, perhaps even the vulnerability, of a team once known for its iron discipline and strategic clarity. And as history has shown time and again, when any institution becomes too dependent on a single individual, it stops evolving. It stops innovating. It begins to calcify, to orbit around the whims of one person rather than the logic of long-term vision. And that, ultimately, is the paradox that Red Bull faces. In trying to immortalize Verstappen, they may be slowly disassembling the very structure that enabled his dominance in the first place. The team that once built its reputation on cold, calculated risk-taking is now flirting with hero worship, with branding decisions that could come back to haunt them. Because this isn't just about marketing. It's about power. It's about what happens when a driver becomes too big to fail. And in a sport where the balance between man and machine has always been sacred, Red Bull may be on the verge of tipping that balance in a direction from which there is no return. They don't want to admit it, not publicly, not even behind closed doors, but deep down, everyone inside that Milton Keynes headquarters already understands the brutal reality unfolding before their eyes. The 2025 Formula One season is slipping through their fingers faster than they ever imagined, and there's no stopping the downward spiral. Internally, confidence has cracked. Belief is disintegrating. The RB21, once thought to be a continuation of their dominance, has turned into a mirage, one that promised power, control, and supremacy, but instead delivered chaos, inconsistency, and technical disappointment. Each upgrade that arrives brings hope, and each one fails to deliver, plunging the team further into a state of quiet panic. They talk about potential, they talk about performance windows and optimization, but the reality is stark. The car simply isn't fast enough, not by their standards, not by championship standards, and certainly not by Max Verstappen's. Week after week, Verstappen drags that car across the line with sheer willpower and driving genius. He doesn't just outperform the field, he embarrasses his teammates, outclasses them to the point that it's almost uncomfortable to watch. His name is practically the only one scoring points in a car that was supposed to make history, not headlines for all the wrong reasons. 7 points, 7 lonely, almost insulting points, have been scored by drivers other than Verstappen. In a team that prides itself on engineering perfection and total control, that statistic alone screams dysfunction. It's not just a warning sign, it's a blaring alarm. Remove Verstappen from the equation, and the entire structure buckles. That's the truth. That's the fear they're trying to suppress. But it's there. Looming. Heavy. Undeniable. And that fear is driving them to act, not with clarity or long-term vision, but with desperation. And desperation, in Formula One, is a dangerous thing. It clouds judgment. It poisons strategy. It leads teams down paths they would have never considered under stable leadership. Red Bull finds itself in that exact position now, grasping for control, chasing fixes, hoping to salvage a season that's becoming impossible to save. They aren't making decisions from a place of strength anymore. They're reacting, flailing, bleeding confidence with every race weekend that ends in disappointment. The departure of Adrian Newey was more than just the loss of a legendary designer. It was a psychological blow that shattered the foundation. Christian Horner, already under immense pressure, turned to the last loyal minds he could count on, Pierre Wache and Enrico Balba. Men who have proven themselves in the past, yes, but who are now expected to plug a hole that's growing by the week. Engineering meetings have turned tense. Updates arrive with hope and leave with confusion. There's no singular vision driving the car's development forward. Just fragmented ideas, conflicting philosophies, and a growing sense that no one really knows what direction they should take. And when there's no direction, even the greatest talents start looking elsewhere. Max Verstappen isn't just thinking about 2025. He's thinking about his legacy. About whether he wants to be remembered as the driver who stuck it out in a failing empire or the one who jumped ship in time to write a new chapter elsewhere. He won't say it out loud, at least not yet. But make no mistake, behind the scenes, in private conversations, in quiet moments with his inner circle, he's asking the hard questions. He's calculating, analyzing, measuring what he still owes this team against what they're still capable of giving him. And right now, the math isn't looking good. Mercedes is no longer whispering, they're roaring. They're pushing harder than ever, making it clear that they see Verstappen not just as a possibility, but as a necessity. They're dangling the promise of a fresh start, a car tailored to him, a team built around his vision. And as Red Bull scrambles to find a way back to stability, Verstappen is watching, waiting, and weighing whether this project still deserves his loyalty. Because when a team loses its grip on control, and when greatness sees the cracks start to spread, walking away becomes not a betrayal, but a strategy. A survival instinct. And Verstappen, more than anyone, knows when it's time to fight for a future, and when it's time to leave the past behind. Toto Wolff is not sitting back or playing the long game. He's making moves now, fast and decisive, in a world where milliseconds define careers and empires. The secret of meeting on the sun-soaked shores of Sardinia wasn't some relaxed afternoon with glasses of wine and vague ideas tossed around under palm trees. No, this was laser-focused. Tactical. A full-blown pitch from one of the most successful team principals in Formula One history to the most dominant force on the grid today. Wolff didn't fly to Italy to enjoy the weather. He went there to look Max Verstappen in the eyes and paint a future in bold strokes. A future where Max doesn't just win races. He leads an empire, he reshapes a dynasty, he becomes the face of a revolution at Mercedes. Not just another driver filling a seat, but the driver ushering in a new era under the game-changing 2026 regulations. It's not about tweaking around the edges. It's about rewriting the rules. And Wolff made that abundantly clear. For Verstappen, this isn't just a job offer. It's not about contracts, clauses, or even paychecks. Those are formalities when you're already at the peak of motorsport and the money is virtually limitless. What this is, what this could be, is the ultimate reinvention. A daring move that would force the world to see him not just as a generational talent in the right car, but as a transcendent figure capable of building greatness from scratch. Critics have whispered, shouted, and typed for years that Max's dominance is tied to Adrian Newey's genius and Red Bull's engineering perfection. But what if he leaves that behind and still wins? What if he jumps into a new machine, with a new philosophy, new power unit, new everything, and still stands tallest? That's how legends are forged. Not by staying safe, but by risking it all when you already have it all. That's how you go from world champion to myth. And yet, there's another side of this coin, one laced with emotional pull and long-term power. Staying at Red Bull isn't merely staying put, it's cementing a legacy in a way no one has done before. Max Verstappen is Red Bull Racing. His name, his number, his presence, etched into every inch of that team's DNA. This isn't just about being a star within a squad, it's about becoming a foundational pillar of the entire organization. The team bends around him, not the other way around. That's unprecedented in modern Formula One. From a personal branding angle, the value is immeasurable. Sponsorships skyrocket. Visibility multiplies. Influence deepens. Max could weave himself into the very identity of a global sports juggernaut. He wouldn't just be remembered as a great driver, he'd be remembered as a constructor of legacy, a corporate powerhouse, a post-racing mogul before he even steps out of the car. And the benefits don't end at legacy. The Red Bull machine, as finely tuned off the track as it is on it, could give Max leverage few athletes ever touch. He could shape junior programs, weigh in on technical decisions, steer marketing strategies, or even hold boardroom weight if he chose to push for it. There's a world in which he retires with multiple championships and walks straight into a senior executive role, still only in his 30s, with global influence and the power to mold the next era of Red Bull's motorsport empire. But therein lies the tension. Because with great influence comes volatility. The more power a single driver holds, the more fragile the internal dynamics become. Teams thrive on unity, cohesion, clarity of roles. If one figure looms too large, it can blur lines, weaken resistance, erode independence. When drivers become de facto team principals, when their word outweighs the engineers, the strategists, the structure, things begin to splinter. What begins as a kingdom can slowly morph into a vanity project. And vanity, in a sport this ruthless, this unforgiving, can lead to downfall. Balance becomes impossible. Decisions become compromised. Voices get silenced. Innovation suffers. All because one man holds too many strings. So Max Verstappen stands at a crossroads. One road offers a high-risk, high-reward leap into unknown territory, a potential reinvention through the Mercedes machine, with Toto Wolff's calculated brilliance and a blank slate for the future. The other offers unmatched power within the fortress he helped build, brand elevation, control, legacy, and the intoxicating pull of total dominance. Each path is lined with opportunity, but also with danger. One false step, one wrong instinct, and the whole narrative shifts. This is no longer just about where Max Verstappen drives in 2026. This is about how he wants to be remembered 50 years from now. As a man who stayed and conquered, or as a man who walked away at his peak, stared down uncertainty, and carved a second dynasty out of sheer will. The world is watching. The clock is ticking. And whatever decision he makes will ripple through the sport for decades. Then comes the most uncomfortable yet unavoidable truth lurking behind every contract negotiation, every quiet paddock whisper, and every carefully worded press release: the rapidly approaching shift to the 2026 power unit regulations. It's not just a change in engine specs or some new set of technical tweaks. No, this is an entirely new era, one that threatens to upend the hierarchy of Formula One as we know it. And at the heart of it lies Red Bull's ambitious, high-stakes collaboration with Ford, a bold move that signifies a total reinvention of their powertrain identity. But behind the marketing gloss and optimistic projections is a storm of unanswered questions. This partnership marks a fresh start, yes, but also an entry into completely uncharted waters. Red Bull powertrains, despite their domination with Honda-derived units, will now be tackling this challenge as true novices in engine manufacturing, side by side with Audi, another newcomer facing its own massive learning curve. History hasn't been kind to fresh entrants in this space. Just ask Honda in 2015. Or Toyota. Or BMW. Even established giants have stumbled under the weight of hybrid-era complexities. The road to competitiveness is never straight, rarely smooth, and often humiliating. Now imagine being Max Verstappen, the reigning world champion, a driver addicted to excellence, someone who lives not just for victories but for domination, perfection, and immortality. Do you think a driver of that caliber, with that level of intensity, with a record-breaking legacy already taking shape, is going to patiently wait on the sidelines while Red Bull and Ford iron out teething issues, chase after elusive reliability, and spend months, perhaps even years, struggling to extract raw performance? It seems unlikely. This is not a man who tolerates mediocrity. He doesn't settle. He doesn't compromise. He doesn't coast through development phases while finishing P7 and praying for a double DNF from his rivals. He wants pole positions. He wants grand slams. He wants to dominate seasons the way he did in 2023, crushing his opposition with a relentless rhythm that leaves no doubt about who rules the grid. Becoming a test subject in a potentially unreliable and underperforming package feels like a nightmare scenario. For someone wired to win at all costs, mediocrity is poison. And yet, the paradox is as fascinating as it is cruel. Verstappen has long hinted at the idea of early retirement. He has flirted with the concept in interviews, sometimes jokingly, sometimes with a tone of dead seriousness. Now a father, his life priorities are slowly evolving, reshaping. The thrill of every race win might not carry the same weight when compared to the first steps of his child or quiet moments away from the spotlight. But with that change comes another temptation, one that is far more seductive, far more dangerous, and far more permanent. The chance to etch his name into the very DNA of a team, not just as a driver, but as an architect of its identity. What if he doesn't just drive the car, but owns part of the team that builds it? What if the garage doesn't just have his number, but his name engraved into its philosophy? What if one day, Max Verstappen isn't just a champion, but a legacy, a brand, a titan of influence whose impact stretches far beyond the checkered flag? It sounds like a dream scenario. It sounds like immortality. But herein lies the risk, the fine line between glory and implosion. Because power, especially the kind that isn't checked, that isn't questioned, that answers only to itself, can mutate into a burden. In a sport as political and ruthless as Formula One, influence can rapidly evolve into blame. If the engines fail, if the chassis struggles, if the Ford collaboration backfires, if expectations outpace results, there won't just be headlines, there will be blood. The spotlight that once made him a hero will turn into a magnifying glass, exposing every flaw, every misstep, every strategic blunder. And this time, he won't just be a driver trapped in a bad car. He'll be a decision maker, a part owner, a symbol of a failed revolution. The backlash won't stop at the team principal or the engine department. It will knock on his door, drag his name through the mud, and threaten to tarnish everything he's built. So while the path to power, to influence, to legacy might be calling louder than ever before, it comes with sharp edges. Max Verstappen may soon face the most defining crossroad of his entire career. Stay and potentially shape the future, risking everything in the name of long-term control. Or leave, and seek glory elsewhere while the door is still open. Every lap he drives, every rumor that circulates, every press conference smile hides a deeper tension, one that could explode as soon as the new regulations hit the grid. Red Bull now finds itself standing at the edge of a precipice, staring into an uncertain future that grows murkier with each passing race weekend. With the dominance of Max Verstappen having rewritten the record books and reshaped what it means to control a Formula One era, the team faces a dilemma so complex, so volatile, that every move from here on could either solidify their legacy or shatter the foundation they've built over decades. The power struggle unfolding behind the scenes is no longer a whisper but a storm gaining strength, and the cracks in the fortress that once looked impenetrable are beginning to show. Helmut Marko watches nervously. Christian Horner spins narratives. The engineers work tirelessly to keep the illusion of unity intact. But everyone knows the truth. The clock is ticking. Every concession made to keep Max happy is another thread pulled from the fabric that once defined Red Bull's rebellious, independent spirit. Gone are the days when the team was simply about pushing boundaries and outperforming expectations. Now it's about survival in the Max Verstappen era, where the Dutchman's shadow looms so large it eclipses every other driver, every other team principal, and possibly, even the team itself. Verstappen doesn't just drive the car, he defines the strategy, influences team politics, and in many ways, holds the keys to Red Bull's soul. He is the center of gravity around which the entire team orbits, and Red Bull has seemingly chosen to bet it all on the gravitational pull of a single star. But what happens when that star begins to drift? When other constellations, like Mercedes, now sharpening their knives and polishing their next-generation project, start to draw Max's attention? What happens when Toto Wolff, always playing the long game, finds the exact right moment to strike, offering not just a better car, but something deeper: control, legacy, a new dynasty? Mercedes isn't sitting idle. They're moving, planning, executing behind closed doors. They know what Max wants. They know where Red Bull is vulnerable. And they're watching every single decision Red Bull makes, waiting for the moment they stumble, ready to pounce. Max himself? He's playing chess while others play checkers. He's calculating the risks. He knows what it means to be at the peak, but he's also well aware that peaks are followed by valleys. He's thinking about 2026. He's thinking about legacy. He's thinking about freedom. He doesn't need Red Bull like Red Bull needs him, not anymore. And that terrifying imbalance has turned the paddock into a pressure cooker. The F1 world watches, breath held, ears pressed to every whisper in the motorhomes, eyes locked on every headline and every clipped radio message. Journalists speculate. Fans argue. Former champions hint at truths they're too afraid to say out loud. Team insiders leak just enough to stoke the flames without getting burned. And beneath it all, the question grows louder, more urgent, more inescapable. Is Red Bull constructing a monument to greatness that will stand for decades? Or are they layering cards atop a fragile foundation, knowing full well that the slightest tremor, the faintest breeze of discontent from Verstappen, could send the whole empire tumbling into chaos? If you're Red Bull, do you sacrifice your autonomy, your culture, and your long-term vision to keep one man happy? Do you let him shape your future, rewrite your playbook, redefine your brand? Is that brilliance? Or is it madness dressed in speed and champagne? And if you don't, if you try to reclaim the control, restore the balance, and set limits, are you ready to face what comes next? Are you prepared to lose the man who has delivered the most dominant seasons in your history? Because once Max feels constrained, once he believes the machine no longer exists to serve him, the split could be swift, brutal, and irreversible. So now we ask you, as the tension crackles through every corner of the paddock, as the speculation reaches fever pitch and the future stands cloaked in uncertainty, what would you do? If you were Red Bull's decision-maker, standing alone in that silent moment before choice changes everything, how would you play it? Would you double down on Max and give him everything, control, direction, even the identity of your team? Or would you pull back, risk it all, and start preparing for life beyond him, knowing it might mean trading trophies today for survival tomorrow? Comment your thoughts, because this saga is far from over. In fact, The most explosive chapter has yet to be written. And when it is, one thing is certain: the entire world of Formula One will be watching. Don't blink.